We saw a figure standing between the trees, but it was facing the wrong direction. Backwards. At first I thought it was a trick of distance. In the deep woods, shapes rarely behave the way they should. Branches cross in ways that resemble limbs. Stumps look like crouching animals. The brain fills in whatever it expects to see. But this wasn't that. The figure stood about 30 yards ahead of us, motionless in a gap between two old hemlocks. Moonlight filtered down through the canopy in pale streaks, just enough to outline a person-shaped silhouette. Except its feet pointed toward us. And its head faced away. No, not away. Backward. "Do you see that?" Mark whispered. His voice came out thin, as if the forest had swallowed most of it. I nodded without looking at him. "Yeah." Neither of us moved. The woods had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. The insects had stopped. The night wind had faded. Even the distant creek we'd been following seemed to have lost its voice. It was the kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. The figure didn't shift or breathe. Mark lifted his flashlight, but I caught his wrist before he turned it on. "Don't," I murmured. Something about the posture of that thing made the idea of shining a light on it feel dangerous. Its shoulders were angled wrong, twisted slightly, as if the spine inside it had been rotated like a key in a lock. The arms hung loose, long enough that the fingertips nearly brushed the ground. But the worst part was its head. Though its body faced us, the back of its skull looked toward the trees behind it. Or maybe it wasn't the back. For a moment I had the awful sensation that if it turned, the face might simply rotate through the neck. Mark leaned closer. "Maybe someone's lost." I didn't answer. The longer we stared, the more details felt wrong. The trees around the figure seemed to bend slightly toward it, their trunks leaning in shallow arcs like spectators. And the ground between us, where the trail should have continued, looked unfamiliar. "Wasn't the path right there?" Mark said quietly. He pointed to a stretch of ferns where the dirt trail had been seconds ago. Now there was nothing, just thick undergrowth. My stomach tightened. "We didn't step off," I said. "I know." The silence deepened. Then, somewhere to our right, a twig snapped. We both turned instinctively. Nothing stood there, just black trees and layers of shadow. When we looked back, the figure had moved. Not closer, but slightly sideways, as if it had slid between the trunks without lifting its feet. It was still facing the wrong way, still showing us its back. Yet its body remained pointed toward us. Mark's grip tightened on his flashlight. "You saw that, right?" "Yeah." Neither of us had heard footsteps. The ground between the trees was covered in dry needles. Even a squirrel would have made noise. Another sound drifted through the forest. Faint echo. Right. Mark frowned. "Did you say something?" "No. Something. The words came back distorted, bouncing between the trunks like reflections in warped mirrors. Our own voices, but stretched, thinned, as if something deep in the forest was practicing how to repeat them. The figure shifted again. This time its head tilted. Backward, listening. A cold ripple passed through the air, like a breath exhaled from underground. Mark turned the flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness and struck the figure full in the chest. For one frozen second, the woods held its breath. Then the thing's arms lifted slowly, not toward us, toward the trees behind it, and the forest answered. Branches creaked. Trunks groaned. All around us, the woods seemed to lean. The flashlight beam trembled as Mark whispered, "What the hell is that?" The figure's shoulders twisted further. Too far. The spine inside its silhouette rotated with a wet, slow motion that made my teeth ache. Then the head turned. Not the body, just the head. It rotated completely around its neck until a face looked at us. But the face was wrong. Flat, smooth, no eyes, no mouth, just pale bark-like skin stretched tight across bone. The echoes returned. What that? But the voices weren't ours anymore. They were deeper, older, like the forest had found its own way to speak. The figure stepped forward. The sound it made wasn't a footstep. It was the creak of wood bending. The trail behind us shifted. I heard Mark suck in a breath. "Alex," he said quietly. I turned. The path we had walked was gone. In its place stood a wall of trees that hadn't been there before. Not young ones either. Massive trunks, thick with moss, their bark cracked with age. Impossible. We'd come through open space. The forest had rearranged itself. The thing between the trees tilted its head again. Watching, learning, and then I noticed something worse. There were more shapes deeper in the woods. At first they looked like ordinary trunks. But when the flashlight beam drifted across them, their outlines shifted slightly. Too symmetrical, too narrow. Figures, dozens, all standing between the trees, all facing the wrong direction. My voice barely worked. "Mark!" He saw them too. The beam jittered across the forest. Everywhere it landed, another shape revealed itself. Still, silent, waiting. The nearest figure took another step. Its legs bent in a way that suggested joints where joints shouldn't be. The creaking sound spread through the forest like a slow wave. All around us, the other figures moved a fraction closer. Mark grabbed my arm. "We need to run." But the forest had already decided otherwise. When we tried to move, the ground dipped sharply under our feet, as if the soil had softened. The trees around us leaned inward, closing, guiding, separating. Mark stumbled to the left, sliding between two trunks. "Mark!" I lunged after him and slammed into a wall of bark that hadn't been there a second earlier. The forest had folded. I spun around. Mark was gone. Only the figures remained. One stood directly in front of me now, closer than before. Its head slowly rotated backward again, hiding the blank face, as if it didn't want me to see it yet. The echoes whispered through the trees. "Run, run." But the words stretched into something longer. "Root." The ground under my boots pulsed faintly. I looked down. Thin, pale shapes were pushing through the soil. Roots, but they weren't growing downward. They were growing upward, reaching, and then I understood what the backward stance meant. These things weren't looking at us with their faces. They were listening with the forest behind them. Their bodies faced the prey. Their senses faced the woods. Every step we took, every breath, the trees heard it first. The nearest figure leaned closer. The creak of its spine echoed through the silent forest. And somewhere far behind it, deep among the trees, something enormous shifted. Not walking, not crawling, just turning. The forest exhaled. And every figure between the trees took one synchronized step toward me, facing the wrong way, but coming exactly where they needed to go. The forest smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. Not the faint promise of rain, either. It was the deep, mineral scent that rises from soil just after a storm. The smell of earth breathing out after being pressed down by water. Except the canopy above us showed nothing but thin bands of afternoon light. "No clouds," Owen said, squinting upward. "Weird." I nodded but didn't answer. The smell was too strong to ignore. It soaked the air, clung to the inside of my nose, and coated the back of my throat like humidity. But the air wasn't wet. It was warm, dry even. The scent simply existed there, heavy and impossible. We were already hours into the forest by then. The trail we'd followed most of the morning had gradually thinned into something closer to a suggestion than a path. Moss swallowed the ground. Roots twisted across the soil like veins. Ancient trees stood everywhere, thick, furrowed trunks rising into a ceiling of tangled branches that filtered the light into dim green patches. The place felt older than the map suggested, older than the park boundaries. Owen took a few steps ahead, brushing his hand along a mossy trunk. "Smell that again," he said. "I do. It's getting stronger." He wasn't wrong. The scent deepened as we walked, becoming richer, darker, like wet leaves left too long in a pile. The forest floor should have been damp if that smell meant anything. But when I crouched and pressed my fingers into the soil, it crumbled dry. Above us, the light shifted. Not the sun itself. The beams filtering through the canopy seemed to bend slightly, angling sideways in thin green lines before straightening again. I blinked. When I looked back, the light appeared normal. Owen kept moving. "You sure this is the right direction?" he asked. "I think so, but I didn't." I turned slowly, trying to find the faint depression we'd been following earlier. The path behind us was gone. Not hidden, gone. Where our footprints should have been was an unbroken carpet of moss. "Did we step off?" Owen asked quietly. "No." We both stood still. The forest hummed faintly around us. Not insects, those had been quiet for a while now. The sound felt deeper, like a vibration moving through the trunks themselves. The smell of rain thickened again. Except now there was something beneath it. A sour edge, like water that had sat too long in a hollow log. Owen sniffed the air. "You hear that?" "Hear what?" He frowned. "Thought I heard someone talking." I waited. The forest held its breath. Then, very faintly, something returned through the trees. Talking. Our own word, but stretched, distorted, came from the wrong direction. Owen turned toward the sound. "Hello!" The echo came back again. "Hello, low," but softer, as if spoken through soil. A slow breeze drifted between the trunks. The smell of rain surged with it. Not just rain now. Wet bark, old leaves, cold stone. Each scent layered over the other like overlapping memories. I suddenly felt the strange impression that the air itself was breathing. A long inhale passed through the forest. Then a slow exhale followed. The leaves overhead shivered. Not from wind, from something moving between them. Owen stepped closer to me. "Okay. That's not normal." "No." The shadows under the trees stretched longer. But the sun above hadn't changed. I looked down. My shadow leaned sideways across the forest floor, thin and crooked, pointing toward a cluster of trees where no sunlight reached. Owen's shadow bent the same way. We hadn't moved. The shadows had. Another breath passed through the forest. This time the smell changed. Still rain. But now it carried something else. A sweetness, rotting fruit. And beneath that, something colder, like the inside of an old cellar. Owen rubbed his arms. "It's humid now." He was right. The air clung to my skin suddenly, thick and damp as if a storm had just passed. Except the sky above the canopy remained bright and empty. "Maybe there's water nearby," he said. But the scent didn't lead downhill like a stream. It drifted unpredictably. One moment behind us, the next somewhere ahead. Like it was searching. We started walking again, slowly. The forest responded immediately. Branches creaked. Trunks shifted. Not visibly at first. Just enough that gaps between trees seemed to narrow or widen when we weren't looking directly at them. The ground dipped where it had been flat seconds earlier. And every time we spoke, the forest repeated our voices slightly wrong. "Did you hear that? Hear that? What was that smell? That smell?" Each echo sounded more confident than the last. Like something practicing. The rain scent deepened again. My chest tightened. It smelled exactly like the air after a storm from my childhood. The first summer rain hitting hot pavement behind my old house. The memory arrived so suddenly I almost staggered. Owen stopped walking. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just..." I paused. He was staring into the trees. "What?" He raised a hand slowly, pointing. "Look at the air." At first I didn't understand. Then I saw it. The light filtering through the forest carried faint shapes moving inside it. Not solid. Not visible enough to focus on. But the air itself seemed thicker there, like heat rising from asphalt. The distortion drifted between the trees in slow waves. Every time it passed, the scent of rain surged. Owen whispered, "It's moving." The shapes slid silently through the forest canopy. When one passed near us, the smell changed again. Rain, wet soil, pine, and then something else. A smell I recognized without wanting to. Old paper, basements, forgotten rooms, memories. It wasn't water the forest smelled like. It was time. Every breath carried another moment, another place, 100 storms from different years layered together in the air. And something inside that moving distortion was breathing them in. The ground behind us shifted. I turned quickly. The trees had closed again. Closer this time. The gaps between trunks now formed narrow corridors, gently angling us deeper into the forest. Owen exhaled slowly. It's hurting us. Yeah. Above us, the distortion thickened. The invisible shape in the air drifted lower. The rain smell flooded the clearing. For a moment, I smelled something familiar. My grandmother's garden after a storm. Wet roses, stone paths, a place that hadn't existed for 20 years. Owen's expression changed. You smell that? Yeah. What is it? My childhood. He didn't laugh. Mine too. The air around us pulsed softly. The invisible thing above inhaled again. The forest leaned inward. And the smell of rain deepened until it felt like we were standing inside someone else's memories. That's when I realized something worse. The scent wasn't just bringing back the past. It was learning it. Every breath we took added something new to the air. New storms, new places, new lives. The forest exhaled slowly. The distortion drifted closer. And when the next breath came, the smell of rain carried something that hadn't been there before. The faint scent of our clothes, our skin, our sweat. Owen swallowed. It's remembering us. I looked up into the slow-moving shapes inside the light. The forest inhaled again. Deep, patient, like it had all the time in the world to learn every storm we had ever lived through. And somewhere in the distance, carried faintly on the scent of rain, we heard our own voices calling for help.